Welcome back to the Yulin Consulting Podcast. Let's talk everyday equity at the Justice Table, from add-on to all-in, equity that inspires change. I'm Anika Farrell, founder and CEO of Yulin Consulting, LLC, and this podcast. And today we'll be diving into evaluating how to use our equity lenses when completing performance reviews and checking our biases that impact those reviews. Today we have with us Michael Williams, Program Manager at True Measure Collaborative. Hello, Michael.
Hello. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for being with us and taking time out of your afternoon to hold space with us here today. And so as we prep for today's show, we want to think about performance reviews and promotions building fairness, but too often they reinforce inequities. And so every year, organizations spend countless hours on performance reviews, hoping to reward excellence and driving growth, but what it does, and sometimes the system is designed to be fair, but actually it's quite inequitable. So today we're going to think about looking past being part of a cultural fit, looking past executive presence or attitude, and truly evaluating what performance and codifying bias looks like. So in this episode, we're going to think about our title, The Equity Lens in Performance Reviews, Identifying Bias to Minimize it. And so to kick us off, I want to ask you a question, Michael. In your role as a program manager and in previous roles, you probably have had an opportunity to think about what it looks like and feels like to evaluate performance and what that criteria looks like. Can you identify the bias, if any, that you have found in subjective criteria that can impact performance reviews when you've been in charge of processing those?
Even just as a young person, even before I understood really my biases and how I carried those into spaces, how that shaped my lens. Really, it started out as a coach, looking at the lens of how we judge athletes and our players and who gets a starting role versus who's coming off the bench. And that lens, right, led to also the work that I have done in schools. And currently my role as a program manager, evaluating teacher performance. And really, some of those biases are youth. Some of those have to do with personal connections that you may have with somebody. Maybe you like the same show, or maybe you grew up in the same neighborhood, or maybe you know the same person. You have family ties. So I see a lot of biases show up in a lot of different ways that can impact how we evaluate people that we come in contact with on a daily basis.
Thank you for that. And I think we have to think about, too, when we say those things like executive presence and cultural fit, we begin to establish norms of communication and behavior. We don't allow people to truly exemplify who they are, the way that they show up in a space, especially when we talk about people of color who have different types of leadership styles, who have different types of impacts in spaces, and they show up differently when it comes to performance and the way that they are doing their jobs. And so we would like to think about, in the terms of, as you've indicated, how people get to start in a situation. You talked about the individuals who are in sports, who's starting and who's not. And then when you think about who's starting and who's not, you think about, okay, is the attitude of that person a good one? Are they likable? But is that really having anything to do with their ability to be a great employee, a productive employee, and one that actually has the tools and the strategies and the resources necessary to perform, which can absolutely impact their performance reviews? So you talk about, in your role of evaluating teacher performance, how do you see that in order to dismantle bias and break that up in order to provide a substantive performance review that they can use and help improve their skills and abilities?
Yeah, I think to the best of our ability, data. We, as an organization, really talk about the importance of using data, right? And how that can remove a lot of that biases, a lot of that subjectivity, because not that we're evaluating everybody on the same playing field, but what we're evaluating is the growth that the individual is making that we're working with. And so, right, it takes out all of those personal things that you may feel or you may see or perceive. It takes out the emotion of it, right? And really just looking at, are we making growth? And I think where our educators, I think, need to really, or especially our administrators, need to continue to push the envelope is really looking at the growth that our students are making and the growth that our educators are making. Are we looking at the impact of the person that we're working with or supporting, that teacher? Are we looking at their impact as a way that we can continue to see their impact have a positive effect because of their growth and their practice, right? And so I think data is really a big part of how do we take that subjectivity out of those evaluative processes, is really looking at those data pieces.
Thank you. And data pieces are absolutely important. It does help to provide individuals with a tangible place to evaluate someone's performance. How well are you doing? And then also, those things that we are evaluating in the data also helps us to identify where do our employees need supports? What do they need to build on their skills, to be provided with opportunities to excel, so that they don't see that there's subtle ways in shifting goalposts with here's what we think about when we're being subjective versus using some of that information that we're gathering through that data to help evaluate truly and measure something that is tangible, something that they can use, strategies and resources that can help them build in their performance. And as individuals of color, it is important for us to have non-subjective aspects of evaluation. This helps us to truly be able to feel that you are measuring not the person that we are, whether we're likable, whether you like our attitudes, whether you like the way we either walk through an office, don't walk through our office, or to ourselves or not to ourselves. You are actually measuring the work that we're doing and our ways and enhancements of building on that, which is so important. When you think about strategies outside of just measuring the data, what strategies would you share with our listeners about how to support staff, whether it's a certificated staff member, whether it is a classified staff member? Are there strategies that you could identify that would help employees be able to have really intentional performance reviews that are not built around subjective criteria?
Yeah. So with our organization, we do monthly coaching cycles, which has been extremely impactful. And within that coaching cycle, we have a document, a running document that we are constantly using with the educators that we're working with to look at the growth over time, right? So again, it's not just me looking at data by myself and getting my own perception of what this looks like, but talking with the educator through that data as well. And again, it's that running piece where we are checking in with this document and we're looking at, hey, last month I noticed this during this observation, right? And within that feedback session, within that coaching session, it's a collaboration, right? It's a conversation. It's not just me walking in and saying, hey, I didn't see this and you need to do more of this. It's, hey, what did you notice? Hey, I noticed this, right? So that collaborative conversation has to be a part of it. So it's transparent and it's clear amongst both parties.
Agreed. And, that takes us from that subjective criteria, which is often biased, to that objective behavioral indicators that is equitable for others. And when we think about those, some examples are when we think about subjective criteria, like you talked about, communicating effectively. Okay, well, yeah, you communicated effectively, but as we're going through those reviews, it appears you always are responding within 24 to 48 hours of receiving an email, or you're providing clear information on what you can do next to achieve this goal. Those are the differences between subjectivity and objectivity, especially in performance reviews. When we talk about, oh, strong leadership potential, what does that truly mean? That is subjective. But when we say you're successfully mentoring staff members and you're leading across functional projects, those are objective ways to truly embed and provide substantive information for our employees to thrive. And so as we think about transparency, what does that transparency look like when you are either given subjective information or objective information? It leaves basically room for people to question themselves and question the process. What do you think about that as far as being equitable in the performance reviews so that people don't have to question themselves, but they're truly able to look at the performance that they've done, as you've stated in those monthly reviews? How do you help support that for staff?
We start with the self-efficacy rating. So educators, when we look at goals that we have identified with the educator, with the admin, and this is particularly what our organization does, and I think it's really can be effective in multiple settings with multiple educators who are being evaluated, is really talking about what is the goal we're striving for and having that common understanding so it's clear, and then giving the educator an opportunity to look within themselves and say, hey, this is an area I definitely want to grow in, and I see myself at this rating, but I would like to get to this rating, right? And again, it goes back to that transparency and that communication of we're all working towards the same goal here. I'm not driving this ship any more than you are. I'm just helping you get to the destination together, right? We are on this together. This journey is a collaborative process. And so really having the educator be a part of that initial goal setting, I think, is extremely important, because as an evaluator, I can come in and I can say, hey, I didn't notice you doing this, and this is where you need to grow in because I feel it's going to make you a better teacher and it's going to have better impact on your students. But that might not be where your strength is. Your strength may be, hey, I want to get better in this area. And if I get better in this area, it's going to have an impact here. Okay, then let's work on that goal together. All right, let's see where you want to push your practice to, and I want to help you get there together.
Love that. And working together, I believe, helps fundamentally support those staff members to get to maybe a place of achievement, whether that is outside of maybe being an educator, a teacher, or a education support professional, to maybe going to that next level if that's what you are choosing to do. And I think having good substantive, objective, measurable, as you've mentioned, performance reviews is essential in being able to provide that step. People being able to see themselves, whether they're growing in that position that they're in or they're excelling in something else. And they're not caught in what can be identified as the qualification trap, where you don't have enough qualifications to get to this next level. Well, nobody told me. Well, that wasn't part of the performance reviews that we did. And then we're looking over here at the subjective information that really isn't giving them the information that they need to grow, versus that objective information that helps them get out of that qualification trap that leaves people stagnant and unable to achieve at the highest point that they want to. And so I think as we wrap things up, thinking about educators of color, thinking about staff of color, is there anything that I have not mentioned or asked or that we have not shared that we could touch on that would highlight how we could support and make sure that we are intentional about creating equity in those performance reviews so it doesn't leave individuals of color at a deficit?
I just want to reiterate that the commonality. What is our goal that we're working towards, and how am I going to be a part of that achievement? And when I understand my role and I'm clear in what the steps are being identified as achieving that goal, or or what I need to do to help my team achieve that goal, that clarity is extremely important. That upfront communication of, hey, this is where we want to get to, and this is what steps you can take or the team can take to help us reach that goal or help you reach your goal. So being clear about the goal and really communicating the steps that it takes to get there so everybody is clear on what the look fors are.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think when we think about our personal experiences, and if you're in management or leadership and you're evaluating individuals, you're designing a process where potential is visible. And you've mentioned that in your connections with your staff, in your evaluations of what is our goal together. Let's map that out together. And that creates a way to dismantle the subjectivity that we have in those performance reviews and bias criteria that traditionally is defined as qualified. So we are taking it from a subjective way of evaluating things, embedding equity into that system. We are having something that we're able to measure. We're collaborating together and we're understanding what those goals are collectively so that staff members can reach those. And so, Michael, I want to say thank you for your insights and highlights around this information. And for our listeners, I want you to think about a takeaway. Ask yourself, does your evaluations processes measure potential or just privilege? And then as you think about that, reviews shape futures. So be sure to make them equitable and embed every aspect of potential within those interviews and those reviews so that they're collaborative and they're meaningful for those individuals that are impacted. And so, Michael, I just want to say thank you again. I appreciate you being on the show with us today. And we want to say to all of you, have a great evening and look out for season 2 of Let's Talk Everyday Equity at the Justice Table.